Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Akila, and congratulations. What a terrific evening. This year gets better, or this event gets better and better with each year. We are going to have a very informal conversation here. These guys don't know the questions I'm going to ask, so you can watch them squirm a little bit. And we're going to start with Mike, because you probably haven't heard enough about his schooling background. But we thought we'd talk about their own experience in schools, and now working for three very different but interesting companies, what they're seeing as employers as well as disruptors who are trying to shape the future in very different but positive ways. So, Mike, if you don't mind me starting with you, I wonder if you can take us back to your high school days and talk about those amazing moments that got you into science and propelled you, pardon the word, into a terrific career.
Sure. It's first of all, it's great to be here. I only recently learned about the Learning Partnership thanks to John and speaking with Akila. I grew up not too far from here in Hamilton. I was an only child of immigrant parents from Greece. I didn't speak English until I was, I guess, 5, or whenever kindergarten starts, around 5. But by the time I got through public school to high school in Hamilton, I went to a high school near our house, nothing special about it in any way, and I was, every immigrant parent's dream. The potential to become a lawyer was my parents' dream, which I had zero interest in. But I was a kid that was good at building things, and the radio story that came up earlier was something that I experienced, as well as getting my first Atari, which my parents, I think, mistook the boring Atari that you could program versus the gaming one that I wanted. So there's not a lot you could do with that Atari, but at age 9 or so, I learned how to program. So those were all good skills, and by the time I got to high school, I had a coach that happened to be the physics teacher in high school, and this coach encouraged me to try my hand at science fairs. So walking through the foyer earlier, I got to experience a bit of a throwback to I guess it's Throwback Tuesday to my days. One thing led to another, and all of a sudden, I jokingly call it the Nerd Olympics. It's the International Science and Engineering Fair put on by the National Science Foundation in the U.S., and it's like 2,000 to 3,000 kids from something like 100 countries, and you get to compete with other kids like you from around the world. But to do that at that level, essentially my physics teacher, that was my soccer coach, convinced me, this is something we're spending time on. And frankly, I had new credits or courses created by my school, my principal, who had to get approval from, I guess, the district school board to make that even possible, because I ended up, progressing and winning through that Nerd Olympics, and getting awards from NASA, from Rockwell Aerospace, from Boeing, and the late Andy Grove, who at the time that I won the whole thing, Andy Grove was the chairman and CEO of Intel, also a Hungarian immigrant, in his case, to the U.S. that came over as an engineer, and then one thing led to another and became the leader of this pretty amazing company, awarded me the gold medal or kind of the top prize in this, and he was more of I was always a 6 foot plus a big kid, and Andy was this more slight man, and he said, you should come to Silicon Valley, and doing what you've done here, building a science fair project, is actually not too different from building companies and building technology. So that was my beginning, I guess.
That was your liftoff.
Yeah.
Robert and Sam, I wonder if you can add to the stories you told earlier, and specifically, love to know if there was a single teacher, one teacher who made a significant difference for you that you still hold today.
So that is an interesting question, because I have no one teacher there. So I have several teachers in different, I would say, facets. For example, when you would ask me, one would be, of course, one of my sports teachers. So I'm always in sports, and so as a young kid, so they have a lasting, really impression on me. And of course, what really struck me there was really how to play in a team. So, and you know, I'm maybe similar to Mike. So I'm a soccer player. So and enthusiast. So and that was what I did during my school time. So I just did sports and so on, and that was my main focus for a while. So and before I really switched over then to more the technical field. So, but nevertheless, one teacher. I think I was fortunate. I had really good teachers, so which really opened up my mind for several things. So I was interested in, especially in history, especially also technical history. So and journalism. So and of course, and then one teacher drew my attention really then to maths and to physics. And the maths, I think I was a disaster, but somehow he thought, okay, there is something in it, because what I always did during the math exams, I started to find out during the exams there must be another way to solve this problem. So. Of course, my teacher always said, okay, nice try, but 0 points. So, and then I had to find a way to stick to the rules. But you know, that is this creative thinking. So, and I think that helped me later on really to find my way out of the soccer dreams to the real engineering career.
And did you eventually get comfortable with math?
Yeah, of course. So
that's good because you're running Siemens. So
as a very,
be sure of that.
I hope so. Yeah. So at a very late point. So, but you know, quite interesting because you saw that, and I mentioned that in the video. So that I did an apprenticeship program in a German coal mine as a power electrician, and that gives me the real practical insight. And later on, when I really had to learn the real math and mathematics for the engineering program. So then for me it was way easier to understand why I do that, because I saw all these practical applications, and I could really then connect this to what I was really then trying to solve with the mathematical methods. So and then all of a sudden it works, and I was always then on the top of the class, at least in math. Yeah.
We're going to come back to experiential and practical learning in a bit, but Sam, was there a teacher that was transformative for you?
Yeah, he was my dad too. So, like I said in the conversation in the video, my dad was a teacher. He was also my dad. He was my tennis coach. He was best man at my wedding. We're tight. And so, I'm not like. If I won the Nerd Olympics, it wasn't because I was smart. It was because I was a nerd. So I don't have the brains of these guys. But what my dad always did so well as a teacher, in fact, the second lesson he told me in advance of this for this speech tonight was what made him a good teacher is he could relate to every student. He figured out what was the connection point to relate to any student. And so they would throw every student at my dad, the smart ones, the slow ones, the tough ones, because he could figure it out and he could make the connection. And so I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I learned from him how to relate to every type of person. So you can throw me in a boardroom with a CEO, and you can put me anywhere else in the world, and I'll probably figure out some sort of connection to that person that will get me through and hopefully build a relationship. So that was the lift-off moment for me, just because my dad could translate that learning, which is not easy. It's not easy to relate and figure out how to make that connection. But he did it very naturally. It was part of his job. It's what made him a great educator, and that's what I picked up over the years.
I want to transition to the school system as we see it today. And all three of you come from very different backgrounds, different countries. Indeed, and maybe Sam, I can keep it with you to ask you about the differences you see between the American system and the system here in Ontario, and what makes us both stronger and weaker, if you will.
I don't know enough yet. I'm 2 years here, and my experiences so far in the education system are my kids. I've got a grade 8 and a grade 6, and then I've got an understanding of some of the universities, like University of Waterloo. We've got a big engineering headquarters in Kitchener-Waterloo. We have 400 or so engineers. 60% of those were graduates of University of Waterloo. Of all the universities we recruit from globally at Google, University of Waterloo is number 2. It's phenomenal. And I've seen, so my exposure is to my, our public school where my kids are, and then University of Waterloo. And let me talk about Waterloo, because that's more exciting than where my kids are right now. But whatever is happening there, and it's a combination of many factors, and probably the most important one is the co-op program that they've developed, that when engineering graduates get out of there, they have 4 or 5 internships under their belt. And so, and I've talked to many employers throughout Canada, especially on the engineering side, and it is such a bonus when a very smart guy or gal can also relate to people, work with a team, has some of the soft skills, knows how to tie a tie, it can ask the people how to get to the bathroom. All those kind of critical skills that actually get you along day to day, in addition to the engineering zeros and ones, that's what separates those folks. And so I think the more and more we can figure out in Canada, and frankly in the US as well, how to combine experience with the raw material of the learning in the university, it just gives you such a head start when you get into a business, and it's so competitive now that you've got to have that to really to succeed.
Yeah. Mike and Robert, if I can draw you out on this, what do you see as our strengths when you compare what you see in Ontario versus abroad?
You know, just to echo the Waterloo point, I mean, we've got an example in Waterloo that is best in class, you know, among the best in the world, and certainly Google and other global technology companies view Waterloo's in their top 3 at least, from a recruiting standpoint. And there's an example where we've unbundled the typical degree. Some people, by the time they graduate, have a minimum of 5, 6 work terms where they typically start off at a bank or at a local, a local company, but eventually get their Facebook or Google work term. And by the time they're in their 4th or 5th work term, they've seen enough that they think, wow, I can do this. I can build one of these companies, or I can be a meaningful, contributor, if not a leader. And I think it's something that we have that is totally best in class. And that example at the post-secondary stage, I think we can actually take that example and unbundle other stages of education, whether that's high school, grade school. And I look back at my experience, and I kind of did that by accident.
So how would you unbundle high school?
There's no reason why you couldn't do some of the same thing that is done in the co-op program in Waterloo at high school, right? If I look at my experience, the stuff that I did with NASA and Boeing and Rockwell during high school, I didn't even get to some of that science till 4th year or my master's degree. So kids can do it. We certainly at Kobo, the last couple of companies, we've always hired from Waterloo. But increasingly, we are hiring and bringing on students from high school. And it's kind of to my earlier point of coding in kindergarten. Like, I think it's great that BC and Newfoundland are going to offer or have coding as a part of the curriculum, but I don't see any reason why it shouldn't start in kindergarten.
Robert, do you agree, coding in kindergarten?
I must say, I was really, when I heard that the first time coding in kindergarten, I was a little bit shocked, yeah, so I said, okay, but, when I see what's really going on, I think it might be the right way to do it, so not to force kids into that, but really gives them the opportunity to do it. And you see how fast kids really are adapting the technology. So you see that you have toddlers sitting in their stroller and working with an iPad. Yeah, so they're so intuitive with this technology. Yeah, and I think that's something we need really to realize and gives them the opportunity. Why not? So and I think the forms of learning are changing. So and we also should look on students, so how they learn, so and how they would like to learn, and then adapt our really way of teaching and also the curriculums, and bring in more practical experiences into the mix. You know, and you asked me between the German system and the Canadian system. You know, I lived the German system, and my kids, they lived both for a while, of course. The German system, then we came to Canada. Our daughter was 12 and our son was 14. So, and daughter in elementary school, son directly in high school. So, and they went through the system. So what is the difference? So I must say, on the funny side, so they came home after whatever 2 weeks and said, okay, whatever you do in school, you get a star and you get a trophy. Yeah? So, and in Germany, it's the opposite way. So if you're not blamed, yeah, you're doing good. So, you know, I think the truth behind that is you need to find the balance. So on the other side, so the German system is very competitive in a way. So, and here the Canadian system is very inclusive. So, and that is what really our kids really benefited from. So they came into the school system, and there was every effort and every support was there really to make them successful. So, and nobody is left behind. So, and I think that's a strength the Canadian system really should keep and nurture. And the diversity, I think that's our kids really experienced coming from, let's say, Bavaria, where you have the diversity between the upper Franconians, the middle Franconians, and the lower Franconians. So I think that is an experience. So for kids, which really helps them in the future, really to be more open, yeah, to be more self-aware, to really be more inclusive, work together in different environments, communicate in a different way. So, and that is a strength we have here in our school system.
But if I hear you correctly, it's inclusion with a bit of toughness.
Yeah, and but I think that's okay. So I personally think you need to challenge and support. So never challenge and then forget to support. So, and never support without a challenge. So that's, I'm a big friend of balance. So, but it needs to be on a very high level. And then, because you see the kids outside, yeah? So you challenge them with a task and they grab it, and to Sam's father, and never underestimate the potential of a student or a kid. So, and I think that is what we really have here in the Canadian system, but also what we could also improve or increase.
The other, one real quick addition, the other thing that the co-ops or the other outside experience that gives kids is confidence. And confidence is such a big deal, especially right out of university when you're going to your first job. You can get crushed if it doesn't go well, right? But to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 at-bats and get in the groove, then when you get into the real world and it really starts counting, you've got confidence, you've got some momentum. And I think that's a big deal. It's a big deal when you're at Google full time or at Siemens full time. Like, it's a hard job. Like, all you guys think that's just easy and it's ball pits and all this other cool stuff. This is a hard job, and it's a lot of pressure. But if you've got those data points and those experiences, and you're an athlete and you're agile, you can hit the ground running in companies and situations like that.
Mike, I'd like to ask you about entrepreneurship. You're a serial entrepreneur, and we've talked in the past about whether it can be taught. Do you think entrepreneurship can be taught, especially at the high school level?
So I like Sam's earlier example about moments and just giving kids more access to those, or opportunities to have those moments. I had a few of those moments, and I like to think of them more as random. With also the good, assistance of a high school teacher that cared, that happened to be my soccer coach and convinced me that, I could get dates if I was a science fair winner, which is totally false. But it's totally false. I do remember moments for me where I saw, I got a glimpse of how you go from an idea plus the next step, which is just starting, to actually turning it into reality. And I always use this quote that in talks that I do with students, that there's people that are dreamers, And then there's those that are stuck in reality. But then there are those that can turn one into the other. And I remember my oldest daughter, Zoe, I guess she would have been 5 or 6 when I came back from, it was a bar, a pub, I guess, on College Street near the Mars building, and I had a napkin, and that napkin had a picture of, this thing that looked like a book on it, and it had a bunch of notes around like what this book thing should do. And then she saw a month later the first kind of crappy plastic version of it. And then a month later, something a bit heavier that was a slightly better plastic version. And she just saw it to the point where it became a reality. And, that's an instructive moment, I think, for any kid, that you can have an idea, you can write it down or put it into, some software or draw it, and then just take the next step and the next and the next and turn it into reality.
You each do a lot of hiring, and if I can ask you to think about some of the people you've hired lately, if you could go back to their teachers in high school, what would you thank them for instilling in these recruits, and what would you ask them to maybe do a bit differently?
That wasn't on the pre-sheet.
Yeah. It was getting too easy for you, Sam.
Right. So I'll pick up
You
back
can Google
on.
it. Huh?
I'll pick back up on the comment I made before. I think the well-roundedness and the athlete versus the specialist. I just think someone who comes into the business world who can pivot, is agile, who can deal with change, who can embrace change, is okay with it. Those are the kind of folks that will succeed in not only our company, but I think in most companies over the course of the next 20 years. And so, and I've seen folks come to Google and a few other places where they don't have that and they struggle. And they can maybe learn it over time, but unless you either train for that or again teach for that, and some of it is entrepreneurialism, some of it is just how we work anymore. That's what I would instruct a teacher now in high school to begin to look for and kind of educate against, because you're going to draw upon that skill set in a big way when you get to the big leagues.
From what you've seen, how do you teach that sort of agility?
Again, at bats, it's experience. It's what it's exposure, right? Like my kids, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't build things, but they're going to see. They're seeing every day how I'm working and how my wife is working with them, and so the more in a classroom setting, the more moments and exposure you give to these folks in all sorts of different disciplines, they can manage it. They can manage the multitasking, and they can deal with it. They're good at it. But if you looked at your kid with their phone, they can do multiple things at once now. And so I think you have to expose them to all these various different things so that they can move from one to the other. And I think multitasking actually is a good thing. I think it's a requirement for business anymore. So I think you got to throw a lot at them, and I think they'll pick it up. But they need that exposure to all those various different ways of thinking. And I agree with your point about coding it as a kindergartner. At least give them the opportunity, something to look at, something to change the way they might be thinking that's a little bit out of the norm.
Robert, what would you go back to teachers and ask for or pat them on the back for?
I had time to think about that, and maybe recently, it was more than a year ago when we hired our students for our academy, for the Siemens Canada Engineering and Technology Academy. So then I asked the head of academy to give me all the CVs of all the students we hired. I think it was 30 CVs. So what I really found is this eagerness to learn and to do also extracurriculum topics. But the eagerness to learn, really to reach out and to say, okay, what else is out there? So that is what we are looking for, because the world is changing so fast. When there's agility, when you have good experts, even now in a later stage of a let's say career, engineering career or business career, and you think everything is static, so of course you're already lost. So, and we need really employees and colleagues who are agile, who are eager to learn, do new things, combine maybe existing things with new things, find new solutions. So, and that is what we are looking for. It's not this 100%, would say, students or 95 or so. It's about this agility, it's about the personality, this openness. It's not always that we look for always the same people, we look for a combination of people. So, and I think that makes it then successful and also so exciting. So, and therefore I must say that is where I would thank the high school teachers, whoever they are, of the students we have hired. And I think that was an experience for me really to continue to do that.
Well, it's certainly one of the strengths of the public school system in Southern Ontario is the diversity. So kids coming out of those schools today are just natural, are very comfortable with people from all sorts of backgrounds, which puts them way ahead of probably the majority of people on the planet.
So maybe allow me one remark. So when I look now back, and you know, we integrated a lot of our engineers and also our legal team and our commercial colleagues, health and safety guys into our program, mentoring with high school, even of course with mentoring for our academy students. So, and you cannot imagine how that changes, it's changing the culture of our company now. All of a sudden they are exposed to those young people. They cannot lean back and say, okay, first you have to weigh your way through the ranks. Yeah? So they see, oh, we can benefit from that. So, and it's changing the culture in our company. So we see more openness. I see this eagerness really to reach out, to be involved, to be engaged, because they see it's rewarding, and it also makes business sense. It in very say or many aspects. So they benefit personally, and they are also communicating in a different way. So, and that helps us as a company really to grow and to thrive.
Mike, we've talked in the past about failure and whether kids are exposed enough to failure, which probably speaks to your point about moments, because moments give you success or failure. How do you think we're doing in terms of our schooling and the environment that it fosters for frankly, for failure?
That was also not on the pre-list of questions. You know, listen, my own personal experience, I've got 3 daughters, and you know, through their various schools that they've gone through, I guess what I would observe is that you know, this idea of competition where somebody wins and someone loses is less of a popular idea these days. And I get the value of inclusion and the value of where, you know, almost everybody can win, but I think something is lost when there isn't that opportunity to kind of to fail, right? If I look at my experience or experiences of other people on my team, and frankly other people that I've worked with in building companies, some of the greatest lessons are learned through failing. So I know from my own experience with my kids, they don't have enough of that exposure. And really the main place that they do get it is through sport. And you know, whether it's like going to your first swim meet, where I was shocked that, but I kind of liked it, that they didn't tell our kids, you know, the rules around, you know, what would get you disqualified or not. And every single one of my daughters has been DQ'd on their on her first, you know, which is a bit sadistic, I guess, but they very quickly learn not to get DQ'd the next time around. And you know, back to your earlier question, I kind of think that ability to play in a team, to understand winning and losing, is like a vital, vital thing that we look for in startups, because most of the time when you're building something new, like 98% of the time you are failing. It is like mostly failing with moments of yes, but then mostly failing. So I mean, I don't know, other than through sport, how well we're doing there, but it feels like it's less of a priority to give our kids exposure to that.
Sam, you came from, I assume, a more competitive environment. It sounded pretty competitive.
Yeah. Again, going back to a dad lesson, my dad always just said you learn much more from your losses than your wins. Now you got to break down every loss and figure out what happened, but it's also the one thing that I do think is another thing that we look for at Google, especially in the more senior levels. I didn't get my job in Canada until now because my boss said you haven't had a big bad year yet. So when you have a bad year and you have to come back and you have to figure out how to fight back and you can show your resilience, then you're ready for this job. Because you're going to have to fight through those cycles. You're going to have to show your team how it's done. And actually, the reason I moved here was for two reasons. One, for the job, but that was only 50%. The other reason was I wanted to put my kids in a very tough position. I moved my daughter here when she was 12. She didn't talk to me for 6 months. As long as we had Wi-Fi, my son was fine. But it put them in a tough position. And they both hadn't struggled for the first 10 years of their life. Now they had new friends to meet, new country, new culture. Best thing we ever did as a family. And she still loves me and talks to me, at least for the next couple of years. But I think I think we need to expose our kids more to failing and then coming back and figuring out how they deal with that, because it's a fact of life.
Right. And Robert, I think you touched on this a bit earlier, but I just want to draw you out on this question of failure and how we can do better at failure.
Yeah, it's exactly, I mentioned it before. So I think it's important to encourage kids, but also to give them really tasks where they really can try really to get to their limits. So it's in whether it's in whatever math or physics or commercial class or in language and so on, so that they really see, okay, they have to really to push the boundaries a bit, and it's then not a disaster when they are not whatever successful in the way they think they should be successful, but that they really see, okay, so I can achieve more if I really invest more. So on the other side, you know, I come from an environment when I went to school, so failure was not an option. Yeah, so it was very regulated and so on. And you know, Germans are kind of perfectionists, everything 100%. Play with a German soccer, so there is no friendly game. So it's but you know that taught me, okay, it can be tough, so, but you learn with your losses. And so, you know, I played soccer on a very high level, competitive, and there were, of course, a lot of, I would say, losses, and you didn't win every game, but then the team helped each other, and next time you learned from it, and then you tried it again. And I personally think, came up here, we need to have more, also more sports, and get the young kids more into sports, and especially in team sports, so that they're really exposed to that in a more playful way. So what I see in the high school system, so there's not enough sport on the schedule. So it's very randomly, and it's not enough. The kids cannot really get their steam out. They do a lot of sports maybe outside of school, but that is, of course, then also very stressful for the parents, with all the driving exercises and so on. I think the educational system needs more sport in the curriculum, more time for that. That gives also, or frees up the brain, yeah, and then that helps really the kids really to bring themselves in sync with their mind, the physical, and also their mental abilities.
Right. Well, I think we're almost out of time, but we've got a room full of educators here and people who support educators, and I wonder if I could ask each of you what your final thoughts would be for them, what you would urge them to embrace in the coming years, given all that you see in your businesses. What should they be thinking about as they sort of work with the next generation? Sam, maybe we can start with you.
Change, be open to change. There's going to be different ways of learning. There's going to be different types of students. There's going to be different technologies. And I've watched my dad go through this a little bit. If you don't modify your approach a little bit or be open to new approaches, again, or new mechanics to teaching or delivery systems, you could be out of touch, and you're going to be out of touch most importantly with your student, which you have to relate to. So I think, again, just be open to change, even in a system that has, not in a great way, has done the same thing in some ways over and over again. Be open to when this change comes, because when it comes fast. And you'll be a much better educator and at your job when you can relate to a student also moving that fast.
Mike?
So, I think a lot of people in tech see a replatforming or an opportunity for the education system to be unbundled and to change dramatically at all different levels. And I don't know what the time frame of that is, but I see it happening all over the place. I think in this country in particular, where I somehow became this tech guy and got the experience of building companies, what was pretty stark to me, and I think it's stark today, certainly with what's happened with our economy and the currency. I mean, I became this guy that was someone that loved building things and building technologies, but for the most part, this is a country where the currency and what we do and how well we do as a country depends on what comes out of the ground. So if you think about the long term and how we want to change that so that this is not a middling growth country where we want prosperity for our kids, I think it's got to come from a longer term plan, and it needs to start with kids who are in kindergarten. And if anybody has read the book Ender's Game, which is a total nerd book, but anyways, the concept there was, there was some alien invasion coming, 50 years out. And so what they started doing was thinking about educating and training and selecting their kids differently for this longer term goal around, in their case, saving the planet. I think in our case, in terms of the future of the country. So I think as educators, you're on the front lines, and whether it's ideas like coding in kindergarten, I think you need to take the longer term view and seek out partnerships with people in industry, people in higher education, people in different parts of the economy to help bring and frankly try some of these ideas out. They're likely 90% to fail, but that's the only way to try to find the ones that will succeed.
That's great. Robert, last word, please.
Yeah, I think I have not a real solution, and for an engineer, normally it's an uncomfortable place to be in, but my gut feeling, my gut feeling tells me, so when I look on what's going on now in our world, I think for each and everybody who has access to the internet, so all the knowledge of the world is accessible. So, and when I think about that, so just as an idea, so if we really could teach our students or kids that they are able to really to find the right knowledge in relation to the problems they face, so that we teach those technologies or methods so that they feel comfortable to address each and every problem, and then are eager to learn, and maybe even with the right depth to learn about, would say, now for this problem I need math, I need to go deeper, and for this problem I need more knowledge about history, so I know how to go deeper and get this knowledge and then combine that. I think if we could bring that into the mix, then I think we would first of all motivate our kids really to constantly learn, and that they see learning is not something so I need to do to have a living, so they make it maybe a way of life. So, and then it's a natural thing. So, and that would be my ideal educational system. So, and we are so really blessed now, so, and that was maybe a nice joke, but it also shows how good it is that we have Google, yeah? So when we have a question, so we ask Google, or from the other company we talk to Siri and whatever. So, but you know, we have this big opportunity to get every answer we want to have, and we also can go deeper. So because the knowledge base is open now, it's a democracy and democratized, would say, a way to access knowledge, and it's not that a certain, would say, class of people owns the knowledge. So it's open for everybody, and really, if we can make sure that everybody understands that, and that the educational system really brings that forward to our students, I think we all can benefit from that.
That's a great note to end on, that knowledge is open to everyone. This has been really inspiring. I suspect you'd all make great teachers if you ever wanted to give up what you're doing now. But thank you for sharing your thoughts tonight, and thank you to the audience.
John.
Thank you.